Ladies and gentlemen, my speech today is called the Carapace metaphor. So, carapace, a term often associated with the protective shell of creatures like turtles and snails, which serves as a poignant metaphor for the barriers individuals construct around themselves. These shells, while offering protection, can also isolate and confine. In the context of mental health, many individuals retreat into their own carapaces, shielding their struggles from the world due to fear. So, due to fear of judgment and misunderstanding, this speech is not just a narrative, it is a call. It is a call, ladies and gentlemen, to dismantle those shells, both societal and personal. So, I would like to share my personal journey on my mental health to navigate the shadows around the mental health stigma. A year ago, I found myself ensnared within my own carapace. As a university student, the mounting pressure of academic expectations and societal norms became overwhelming. Sleep eluded me for weeks, and when it did come, it was just accompanied by restless nights filled with anxiety and despair. Attending lectures became a Herculean task, and moments of solitude were often interrupted by intrusive thoughts whispering, "You are not enough," or "This pain will never end." So I was basically stuck in this cycle of rumination despite having all of my great peers around me, despite having no priority of history of mental health issues. I was plunged into a realm of darkness I couldn't comprehend. The invisibility of my pain made it even more isolating. Ladies and gentlemen, unlike a physical ailment, there were no visible signs to indicate my suffering. This invisibility, coupled with the fear of being labeled weak or unstable, compelled me to remain silent, stuck in my own carapace. So, ladies and gentlemen, mental pain does not scream or bleed. It festers quietly behind a smile, under a laugh, during celebrations or study sessions or party where people are happy but some individuals are not. And often no one notices. Not because they don't care, but simply because they do not know my struggle. They simply don't know what to look for as well. So, ladies and gentlemen, mental health struggles can be deeply personal, but their impact is far reaching. This essay is to break the silence, seeking support. Let me share to you my experience on seeking support. The turning point of my life came when I mustered up the courage to reach out. A simple message, a simple one, to a compassionate lecturer. "Sir, I'm in pain. Help me." This simple phrase became the catalyst for my journey towards healing. This act of vulnerability opened doors to professional support, therapy, and a renewed understanding of self-worth. It took weeks of counseling and the support of peers, educators, and healthcare professionals to begin the slow, painful, but necessarily climb out of that dark space. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is my story, which mirrors the experience of countless individuals. According to the National According to the National Alliance on Mental Illness, NAMI, nearly 1 in 5 adults in the US experience mental illness each year, yet more than half do not receive the treatment primarily due to stigma, lack of access, or fear of being judged by other people. So, ladies and gentlemen, this fear leads them to hide in their carapace. Let's understand mental health beyond the myth that the society has created. So, mental health disorders such as depression and anxiety are not more figments of imaginations or signs of personal weakness. They are legitimate medical conditions, often resulting from chemical imbalances in the brain. Just as we wouldn't dismiss someone with diabetes or hypertension, we mustn't trivialize mental health challenges. According to the World Health Organizations in 2021, over 700,000 individuals die by suicide each year, making it a significant and prominent global health concern. Notably, suicide is the third leading cause of death among individuals aged 15 and 29, underscoring the urgency of addressing mental health among youth. The, this stigma leads them to hide in their carapace, ladies and gentlemen. So, the weight of a stigma becomes a barrier to healing. Ladies and gentlemen, stigma surrounding mental health remains one of the most formidable barriers to seeking help. According to Corrigan, Russ, and Perlich in 2014, they emphasize that societal stigma often deters individuals from accessing necessary mental health services, leading to prolonged suffering and, in some cases, tragic outcomes. According to Pescosolido 2013, further highlight that public prejudice and misconception about mental illness are pervasive across cultures, reinforcing the need for global awareness and education. Stigma manifests in subtle ways: hesitation to disclose, jokes about therapy, reluctance to ask for time off due to mental health concerns. These micro barriers accumulate, fostering silence, ladies and gentlemen. These little simple things that the society might laugh it off, but it will result in these individuals hiding their pain from others. So, ladies and gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen, what about gender and mental health? The silent struggle. Men, in particular, face unique challenges concerning mental health. Societal expectation often dictate that men should be stoic, resilient, and unemotional. This man up mentality discourages many from expressing vulnerability or seeking help. Consequently, men are statistically more likely to die by suicide, a grim testament to the dangers of suppressed emotions and untreated mental health issues. According to the World Health Organization in 2021, addressing this requires reshaping the cultural narrative around masculinity, often equates strength not with suppression, but with openness and self awareness. Campaigns like Movember, and Heads Up in Australia are beginning to pave the way, but there is much work to be done globally. Men and mental health. For men, the cultural expectation to man up or be tough can make it incredibly difficult to express vulnerability or ask for help. Men are less likely to seek help for mental health issues because doing so is often viewed as a sign of weakness, which contradicts societal definitions of masculinity. In fact, research has shown that men are significantly less likely to seek help for mental health issues than women. So, ladies and gentlemen, according to the American Psychological Association in 2019, 1 in 5 Men in the United States experience a mental health disorder each year, yet many avoid treatment due to mere stigma. This reluctancy to seek help, coupled with cultural expectation to suppress emotions, can have devastating consequences. Men, particularly young men, are more likely to die by suicide than women, and this trend is particularly prevalent in high income countries. According to the World Health Organizations, also, suicide is the second leading cause of death among men aged 15 to 29, stated by the World Health Organization in 2021. This grim statistic highlights the dangers of a society that discourages emotional expressions and support seeking behaviors for men. Why is this, you may ask me, ladies and gentlemen? One reason is the prevailing attitude towards emotions. In many cultures, emotional expression, such as crying or talking about one's feeling, is associated with weakness and a lack of masculinity. This forces many men to bottle up their emotions, leading to increased stress, anxiety, and depression. Over time, these unaddressed emotions may manifest in destructive ways, such as substance abuse, aggression, or tragically, suicide. So, ladies and gentlemen, these small but yet significant factors contribute to the numbers of leading suicide cases in this world. What about women and mental health? While men are often pressured into silence, women face different challenges when it comes to mental health. Women are more likely to seek help for mental health issues, but they also face societal pressures and expectations that shape their experience with mental health. Often, women are expected to be the caretakers, the ones who hold everything together, which can lead to feelings of guilty, inadequacy, or shame when they struggle themselves. Additionally, ladies and gentlemen, women are more likely to be diagnosed with conditions like anxiety and depression, while men are more likely to be diagnosed with substance abuse disorder and antisocial personality disorder. The gendered nature of mental health diagnosis can be problematic, ladies and gentlemen. Women's emotional struggles are often pathologized, and men's emotional struggle are often overlooked until they reach a crisis point. The intersection of gender and trauma is also an important consideration. Women, especially those in certain cultures or environment, are at a higher risk for experiencing gender-based violence, which can severely impact mental health. According to the National Institute of Mental Health, NIMH, the trauma experienced through violence and abuse can lead to long-term mental health challenges, including PTSD, depression, and anxiety. Women who experience these trauma often carry the added burden of social stigma, feeling ashamed or blamed for the abuse they've endured. What if we can shift the narrative by making the link between gender and mental health is an undeniable, but it is crucial that we start challenging and reshaping the narratives that perpetuates these harmful stereotypes. Men should be encouraged to express their emotion and seek support without feeling shame or weakness. Similarly, women should feel empowered to take care of their mental health and be supported in seeking the help they need without guilt or stigma. For non-binary and gender non-conforming individuals, we must ensure that they have access to affirmative, inclusive care and create safe spaces where they can talk about their mental health without fear or judgment. Ladies and gentlemen, mental health professionals also need to be trained to understand and respect the diversity of gender identities, to provide care that recognizes the unique challenges faced by people of all genders. We all have a role to play in challenging the conversation about gender and mental health. It's time to break free from rigid gender norms and create a world where mental health care is accessible, inclusive, and supportive for everyone, regardless of gender. So, ladies and gentlemen, regardless of gender, mental health services should be available to everyone. What about the role of education and to break the cycle of stigma? If stigma is the barrier, then education is the hammer that can break it. Education is not just about academics or earning degrees, but it is the foundation upon which we build empathy, understanding, and resilience. When it comes to mental health, education plays a transformative role not just in informing but reshaping attitudes that have hardened by generations of silence, shame, and misunderstanding. Imagine it. From a young age, children were taught that emotions are natural, that mental health is just as important as physical health, and that asking for help is not a weakness but strength. This is a dream but a policy. Recommendation backed by the research according to the United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization, UNESCO. Ladies and gentlemen, integrating social and emotional learning (SEL) into school curricula has been shown to significantly improve emotional regulation, reduce anxiety, and increase academic performance among students. In countries like Finland, mental health education is part of the national curriculum, and the teachers are trained not only in pedagogy but also in emotional literacy and mental health first aid. As a result, students in Finland report some of the highest level of life satisfaction and well-being in the world based on OECD in 2020. In Malaysia, initiatives such as Healthy Minds programs, which was introduced in collaboration with the Ministry of Education and mental health NGOs, aim to bring awareness and psychoeducation to secondary school. But we still have a long way to go. Many schools shy away from discussing topics like depression, anxiety, or suicide for fear of putting ideas into young people's head. This is a dangerous myth. Silence does not protect, it isolates. We need mental health education to be age appropriate, culturally sensitive, and continuous. It should begin in kindergarten with simple emotional literacy. For example, how are you today? And continue through the university where students can access trained counselors, workshops, and safe spaces for discussion. Awareness campaign also matter, but they must be strategic, not symbolic. Mental Health Month, World Suicide Prevention Day, and World Mental Health Day are opportunities to shine a spotlight on these issues, but they shouldn't be a one-off events. The conversation needs to be ongoing, both online and offline. Social media too, ladies and gentlemen, can be a double-edged sword. On one hand, it can perpetuate toxic beauty standards, unrealistic lifestyles, and glorify burnout. On the other hand, it can also be a powerful platform for spreading awareness. Accounts led by the mental health advocates, therapists, and lived experience storytellers now reach millions, providing digestible, relatable mental health content. In fact, Ladies and gentlemen, the American Psychological Association in 2022 found that younger generation increasingly use platforms like TikTok or Instagram to seek support and learn coping strategies. But for this to be effective, we must also teach digital literacy and critical thinking so that young people can distinguish between helpful guidance and misinformation. Teachers, parents, managers, and community leaders all have a role to play. Educators, especially, must be trained not only to teach but notice signs of distress, respond with compassion, and know when and how to refer students for professional help. Ladies and gentlemen, the Royal Australian and New Zealand College of Psychiatrists recommends that all educational professionals receive baseline training in mental health, akin to CPR for emotional crisis. Ultimately, education and awareness don't just prevent crisis, but they also empower people. They give language to the silent, strength to the struggling, and knowledge to the unknowing. When we understand mental health, we reduce fear. When we talk about it, we normalize it. And when we prioritize it, we can change lives, ladies and gentlemen. By these small steps, obviously, it will lead to many seeking help and many being aware of the mental health crisis that has been plaguing our generations for years on end. Ladies and gentlemen, we must also harness the power of conversation. Conversations are as powerful as they can either isolate or unite us, silence or heal us. When it comes to mental health, talking openly and honestly can be the catalyst for change. Yet, in many, discussing mental health issues is still a daunting and an uncomfortable task. Society has ingrained in us that mental health struggles should be hidden, kept behind closed door, or whispered about in hushed tones. This silence has only served to perpetuate stigma, creating an environment where those who suffer feel ashamed or embarrassed about seeking help. But here's the truth: conversation is one of the most effective tools that we have to dismantle the stigma that surrounds mental health. By talking openly and creating safe spaces for dialogue, we can begin to break down the walls of misunderstanding and fear. When we talk about mental health, we are not only acknowledging the existence of the problem, but also validating the experience of those who are struggling. For example, me. One of the most powerful things we can do for someone who is experiencing a mental health crisis is to listen, not to judge, not to offer immediate solutions, but simply to just lend an ear to listen. According to research by the Mental Health Foundation in 2020, one of the key factors in mental health recovery is the experience of being listened to and understood. Often, people don't need someone to fix their problems immediately, they just need to feel heard. Moreover, sharing our own stories can create a ripple effect. By opening up about our personal experience, we give others permissions to do the same. Imagine a world where it's as normal to share your mental health struggles as it is to talk about flu or cold. In fact, some of the most impactful conversations about mental health begin with personal narratives. They challenge stereotype, dispel myths, and shows others that it's okay to be not okay. Bren Brown, a leading researcher on vulnerability and shame, argues that vulnerability is the birthplace of courage and connection. By allowing ourselves to be vulnerable, we create opportunities for others to connect and heal. However, these conversations need to be done in a compassionate, non judgmental way. Acknowledge that everyone's experience with mental health is unique, and we all come from different backgrounds, cultures, walks of life. What works for one person may not work for another, but the fundamental truth remains. Every conversation matters. The rise of online communities and platforms has also made it easier to discuss mental health. But with both positives and challenges, digital spaces can provide anonymity, which may feel safer for individuals reluctant to speak openly about their struggles. For example, ladies and gentlemen, platforms like Reddit, Instagram, Twitter host groups and pages dedicated to mental health awareness, offering peer support and shared experience. The National Alliance on Mental Health, NAMI, in 2021 highlights that for some people, online forums are a lifeline, offering a sense of community where real life connections feel too intimidating or inaccessible. But just as easily as digital platforms can support, they can also harm if you if used improperly. The rise of online bullying, negative comments, and toxic comparison culture can sometimes exacerbate mental health issues. Therefore, it is important to foster safe digital spaces and encourage um, digital literacy so that conversations surrounding mental health are supportive and beneficial, not harmful. What does it look like to truly harness the power of conversation in our day to day lives? It begins with creating open environments for discussion in schools, workplaces, and communities. When we talk about mental health, we need to listen actively without judgment and refrain from offering simplistic solutions or dismissive comments. The words we use matter. For instance, phrases like snap out of it or it's all in your head can make someone feel more isolated and less likely to seek help. Training programs, workshops, and awareness campaigns in school and workplaces can encourage these conversations. For example, initiatives like Mental Health First Aid (MHFA) and Safe Talk have shown to provide individuals with the tools to engage in meaningful conversations about mental health and guide others towards seeking help. These programs aim to provide participants with the confidence and skills to support someone experiencing a mental health crisis, whether it's a friend, coworker, or a student. By normalizing these conversations, we begin to shift the narrative around mental health, turning it into an ongoing active topic of engagement rather than a silent and taboo subject. This is necessary part of creating a society that prioritizes empathy, compassion, and support for those struggling with mental health challenges. So, ladies and gentlemen, what about community and institutional support? While individual courage and personal awareness are essential first steps in addressing mental health, we also, as a society, must recognize that healing and resilience do not happen in isolation. They also flourish in environments that are nurturing, supportive, and well resourced. That is where the role of community and institutional support becomes absolutely vital. Let us begin with the concept of community support. Communities such as communities can be they local neighborhoods, schools, university, or religious groups could form the social fabric to of our lives. When these communities are equipped to understand and respond to mental health needs, they become powerful agents of healing. According to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention (CDC). Social connectedness is one of the most important protective factors against depression and suicide. That means something as simple as feeling supported by a group can literally save lives. Take, for instance, the story of Mental Health First Aid, a global training program that teaches individuals how to identify, understand, and respond to signs of mental illness and substance use disorder. So, this program has been implemented in over 24 countries and has trained millions of people to become mental health advocates within their communities. Research shows that such programs significantly increase mental health literacy and reduce stigma. When ordinary people are empowered with knowledge and empathy, extraordinary things can happen. University and schools can also play a transformative role. Educational institutions should be more than places of academic learning. They must be safe spaces for emotional growth. That means having on campus counseling, services, crisis hotlines, peer support groups, and most importantly, trained faculty and staff who can respond to mental health crisis with compassion rather than punishment. In Malaysia itself, for example, the Healthy Campus program, initiated by the Ministry of Higher Education, includes mental health awareness as part of its broader student wellness agenda and a promising step in institutional accountability. But support group must go beyond temporary programs and awareness weeks. We need long term investments, ladies and gentlemen. This is where governments and healthcare institutions step in. The World Health Organization has long emphasized that mental health is not merely a personal issue, but it is a public health priority. Unfortunately, mental health receives only a tiny fraction of healthcare funding globally. In low and middle income countries, up to 85% of people with mental disorders receive no treatment at all, based on World Health Organization in 2021. This is not the gap, it is a chasm. Bridging that chasm requires bold policy changes, increasing funding, and better integration of mental health services into primary healthcare. And let's not forget the workplace. Adults spend a significant portion of their lives at work. A toxic work culture, the one that glorifies burnout, ignores emotional well-being, or stigmatizes mental health leave, can be extremely damaging. On the other hand, companies that provide employee assistance programs, mental health days, and flexible work arrangements, and mental health literacy workshop reports higher productivity and employee satisfaction. It's not just ethical, but it's also smart business. According to Deloitte's in 2020 report on workplace mental health, for every dollar spent on mental health interventions, employers get a return of $5 in reduced absenteeism and turnover. But community and institutional support must also acknowledge diversity and inclusivity. Marginalized groups such as LGBTQ plus individuals, refugees, and persons with disabilities face additional layers of stigma and barriers to accessing mental health care. Support systems must be culturally sensitive, language accessible, and inclusive in every sense. Equity in mental health means recognizing that different communities have different needs and tailoring support accordingly. Ultimately, the presence of strong community and institutional support sends a clear message: you are not alone, you are seen, you are valued, and your mental health matters. When someone breaks their leg, they don't hesitate to go to hospital, do they? We need a world where people feel just as safe seeking help for depression, anxiety, or trauma without shame, without fear. So, let us not stop at simply telling people to speak up. Let us create systems that are ready to listen. Let us not merely raise awareness, but also raise accountability. And let us not wait for another crisis to show that every person, every voice, every mind is worth protecting, ladies and gentlemen. So, ladies and gentlemen, ultimately, how do we emerge from the carapace? Breaking free from the carapace of stigma and judgment is not a solitary endeavor. It requires collective effort. By educating ourselves, fostering open conversations, and advocating for systemic change, we can create a world where mental health is treated with the seriousness and compassion it deserves. Let us strive to build a society where seeking help is seen as a strength, not a weakness, where mental health is prioritized, and where every individual feels seen, heard, and supported. Together, ladies and gentlemen, we can soften the walls of stigma until the carapace no longer isolates but empowers. Thank you, and that is all from me, carapace of mental health.